What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Koppai Podcast, episode 76. I am one of your hosts, Kaz and Risk, joined alongside Mr. Koppai himself, Zach Risk. You found it on my face. Today, we're going to be doing our review, initial impressions, discussion, quick discussion episode on South Park, The Fractured Butthole. We're going to be digging into the game. We've played, what is it? How many hours have you played?
600 or so?
Yeah, 600. I'm, clocking in about, 601. So I'm just a little bit farther than you.
Yeah.
I've played 13 hours. Last played yesterday. I've done apparently 49% of the achievements. So I'm, I guess, halfway through the game. Although you have to figure that a lot of those achievements are, what would it be, like collectibles going beyond the campaign. So probably 2/3 of the way through the story, you would figure, at this many hours in. I mean, over probably halfway, because the last game was about 13 hours, I figured.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to tell with this game. Because when checking now, I'm at 46% achievements, so we're like pretty close.
Yeah.
You probably have like one more achievement than me, because what I noticed too is that this game has less achievements than a Stick of Truth, which was kind of like, what? But it's getting me more gameplay hours. What I think kind of is going on with some of these achievements is that they're tied to this new like novice, and then whatever it's like medium and then master for these certain things, collecting items. And I'm wondering if it maybe just is harder to get some of the achievements. Maybe they're, less easily obtainable. So there's a little more time in it, and there's some like trickery going on. I'm not sure exactly in terms of like the story. In terms of the story, I guess you have played a little bit more than me.
I think because last time we talked, and we won't get into spoilers for the game. It's too awesome of a game to spoil it. I mean, we may speckle some light things here and there, but understand that Zach and I are super cautious on spoilers. We don't want to ruin the experience for anyone, so we'll lean towards the side of safe rather than sorry. But for the sake of discussing the game, we may get into a few things, but we'll try to keep things as vague as possible. That being said, last Zach and I talked personally off air, we were both at the same spot. We had to head to a destination, and I think you were kind of like, and a lot of people have had this problem online, sometimes the game's not super clear about where you need to go next because you just need to do side stuff or level up and all that. And we were both at that point.
I rewatched that scene and kind of got it clear. Like, it does make it kind of obvious. He says, like, all right, I'm going to take what we've learned, and then I'll get back to you guys in a little bit.
So I did a bunch of side stuff, and then I was able to unlock the next portion of the story.
Right.
And then I went and did that story chunk, and then I kind of took a break. And now I'm actually watching the show. I'm trying to get caught up on some of the show beats because there's some references that I don't completely get, which, I mean, the game, if you don't watch South Park, it completely stands on its own, I think. I mean, obviously you get way more enjoyment if you get references and all that, but it's really just a parody on superhero movies going on right now. The basic premise of the game is there's Coon and friends. Eric Cartman is the Coon, and he has this little group kind of like the Avengers. And then there's Mysterion and the other people out there, and they're kind of referred to now as DC Comics, kind of Batman sort of, Justice League sort of people. And they're basically at war with each other to get whoever is the first one to get a Netflix partnership is like the winner. So it's just copying and parodying modern day superhero movies, which most people would understand that kind of satire. So you don't need to watch the show to understand. But because I'm enjoying the game so much, and I've already kind of watched a bit of the show, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and watch like the entirety of the show. And I got Hulu now, so I'm going through and watching it all on Hulu, starting with season 1. And I already got one extra reference now because of watching. It was literally, I think, episode 2, and I don't know if I can say what the reference is without maybe giving like a slight spoiler to like what's in the game. But yeah, it has callbacks all the way back to season 1. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like this game is almost more full of references than Stick of Truth was. Yeah. Like, they've been able to pack so much in, and I really love how there's so many more boss fights, just like in random combat that's thrown in to kind of both they're funny. They have lines and dialogue that's going on within the fights, almost like little cutscenes and
Yep,
things
yep.
happening. And then it also just kind of makes the game a little bit longer, which is just, I mean, Stick was way too short. And thank God this one's already seeming like it's going to be lasting me at least a little bit decent,
And it has the
a bit
DLC
longer.
season pass coming out. And for those of you that don't know, Stick of Truth was a turn-based RPG, very similar to kind of like Pokemon or even Paper Mario in that regard,
Yeah.
where you have your turns, but it's very Paper Mario in the fact that you have like a buddy usually in Stick of Truth, where if you have Butters on your team, Butters would be able to throw his Chaos Hammer and do special stuff like that, where you would usually be isolated to your own abilities of farting and throwing farts at people. In Fractured Butthole, you have the ability to move along in a grid-based system, which I haven't played too many RPGs, turn-based RPGs that have that sort of system. Some people were kind of relating it to Fire Emblem a little bit, like where you go along the Fire Emblem grid, but it's not as open as that. It's more leaning on the side of what you'd expect out of Paper Mario. But just imagine Paper Mario or something like that, where instead of standing on the left and the right, you can actually move and sneak up behind someone, or go in front of them, or go on top of them, and fight in that way. And yeah, in Stick of Truth, you would often run into the thing where just like every other street you had to fight sixth graders, or every other street you had to fight homeless people that were attacking you and all that. And in Fractured Butthole so far, there's been like way more, sure, you have the few moments where you're fighting a sixth grader or something along the street, but there's way more opportunities for just like this random encounter to happen, where it's not just button mashing or doing your same old routine. Like you have to like really think, okay, this character fights differently, and backup comes in, and you have to do all this. Like the gameplay is like, just adding the grid-based system has really elevated itself, which is awesome.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah,
and yeah, and
definitely.
like you said, the combat, like sometimes, I mean, there's been a few, I think, repeat lines. Like if I'm fighting like just the general boss or general like enemies on the street, but when it's a boss fight, it is a full-on additional episode of South Park as far as
Mhm.
like the fighting, and like even it's really weird. Like it's a game that you'd be able to replay, because like if you're fighting with a certain kid and some other kid gets knocked out and dies, like they'll comment on it depending on who that kid is and who the other kid is. It's not like, oh no, we lost someone. Like it's, yo, this person's dead, and it's like, well, that's not what you say. Like, I mean, it's just there's the banter back and forth
Right.
of like, basically kids bickering at each other from South Park, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I mean, thank God that they actually did it. They did a sequel. They didn't do something like, oh, we're never making, I forget what it was, that they did something where they're like, we're never doing that again. I know they did like the latest season. When they tried that, they were like, yeah, we're kind of ending the serialization. So at least they didn't get like too much of a, like with
Hmm.
all the delays and everything.
Well, yeah, I think
They,
even in some of the interviews with the first game with Stick of Truth, they were definitely leaning towards that. Like, man, this was so much work, and we don't know if it's a
yeah.
much of a return on an investment. But yeah,
Mhm.
they went straight
Yeah, it
for
might
it.
have been even that first game that they kind of were very heavily hinting at that, and then ended up doing it anyway. It was just kind of like, please announce another game, and they actually did it. And it just seems now kind of begging for like a trilogy, like to make it
Yeah,
complete in some way. And they have this engine that seems they're really just perfecting it more and more, like with the new combat system and everything, to where, and it ends with a new season pass that seems way more deluxe than the first one, which was just a couple little like skin packs. This one
yeah,
has new adventures coming, so it seems they've really made it so they could do almost like, I think, I mean, they might do one little extra adventure or some little side quest thing in the future for this one for their season pass, but maybe in like the third game they actually do something like almost Bethesda like with Skyrim, where it's like here like Dragonborn and Dawnguard, some like real big beefy
yeah.
extensions to keep the game going. It seems
Yeah, like
like
how
the
cool would it
engine
be
is
if you
perfect
could
for that.
design your own, like, because right in Stick of Truth, it was Koopa, what was it? Koopa Keep,
Hmm.
and which is where like the castle was, like where the Stick of Truth was held.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's the Coon layer is kind of where your main base is. But how cool would it be if, like, in the third one, you could make your own base as the new kid, and you could, have like your own decorated spot and add in your own embellishments, because that's the cool thing they've really done well with Fractured Butthole, is where you can really customize your character. And what's awesome is when you customize your character, you're not only customizing gameplay, but you can customize your outfit and your look and appearance without affecting your gameplay at all. So you can play the game, looking like whoever you want without hindering your gameplay. Where in Stick of Truth, you had to look like if you were the Jewish class. By the end of it, you had like I think you had like the crown of thorns on, and you had like like a priesthood and the Star of David wrapped around you and all that, because you were the high class Jewish class.
Right.
But now, you can be level, 200 and still look like the way you looked at the beginning, which is awesome. And it really plays into that superhero mentality where you are your own hero. And like I played through the first half of the game looking very much so, as much as I could, like the homemade outfit of Spider-Man from Homecoming, where it's like his hoodie up and he has black goggles on and blue sleeves. But now I got some extra costumes and stuff, and I've been able to make myself look like Thor from Thor Ragnarok. And it's really, really cool because like it looks like my guy, but it also looks like Thor, and it doesn't change the gameplay at all. And so they could really double down on that in a third one, where it's just like you can customize your bedroom or your fort or whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and also just with this game, I'm just really impressed with how they've done it again, in terms of I've been laughing like nonstop throughout, like really every cutscene. I kind of was going into it like a little skeptical almost. I mean, I had faith. I kept thinking like it's these guys. There's no way that they're gonna like fail to make me laugh in some way. But it's just, how can they do the first one? I thought was so good. I remember just when I was playing that game, I didn't want it to ever end, but eventually it kind of got to that point where you had to put it down because it just didn't have the longevity of anything else to do, much after you kind of completed what you had to do. And you wanted to, like, at first I had these visions of like living in South Park for a while. We didn't really know what the game was going to be, amount to, if it was going to be a big like Skyrim, like 120 plus hour campaign of, crazy stuff to do. It ended up being way shorter than that, and it was like kind of a bummer. And so then I'm kind of getting those same vibes with this game. Like, again, I just want to live in the world, like, and just have it last an eternity. I'm really kind of glad now, like, I've been kind of busy and haven't been able to play as much, so it's really timing out well with like Destiny coming out in just a couple days, and then Odyssey. Like, I really think there's part of me that wonders if I'll even have it completely done by the time Odyssey arrives.
I think I will.
Well, yeah, you might, but I'm just thinking of like with my schedule and everything I have to do, it's like pretty nice working out, where I was kind of worried that I'd have it completed and it's kind of be sitting idly around, like, waiting for Odyssey. But this is kind of perfect, where it's been like just such a good game to have in preparation for Odyssey. Like, if you are looking for a game that in this hype, leading up to Odyssey, it's probably not. I haven't finished it, but it's it's South Park. They do more of like, a quality story arc, beginning, middle, and end. It's not going to be dragged out longer than it needs to be. So I think that it's a perfect length of a game to get before Odyssey, instead of something like you going like Stardew Valley route, something that could totally suck your attention out for weeks, and you might have to, manage between them, or even like, one of these new AAA games that's coming out. Assassin's Creed comes out in a few days, so that's, I don't know if there's like what's been too recent, but I just think that Fractured is just, it seems like a 5-6 day experience, 10 to 20 hour campaign depending on how you take it.
Yeah, because we are playing in the hardest difficulty, so that.
Oh, and I was gonna say that. I kind of forgot. I was gonna say something, but I totally recommend playing it in Mastermind, because I've been playing it in Mastermind, and while I have noticed some challenge, like there's definitely been a couple times I've died. It's really been like, most of the street fights and stuff I handle with ease, so I can't imagine how easy it would be playing through it on like the lower settings. So definitely Mastermind if you want any sort of like challenge whatsoever, it seems.
Yeah, I could go for like one difficulty higher, because Mastermind, the boss fights especially get like pretty pretty tight sometimes. I'm using like revives. I'm using,
Hmm.
feeding my team some burritos to keep them powered up. But otherwise, yeah, if it's a street battle, like the thing is you can attack them from outside the battle to get an advantage. And so a lot of times, like by the time the battle's even started, I have them all grossed out, kind of
Hmm.
beat up a little bit. So then we go into the fight, and it's just a matter of finishing them up and wrapping it all up. But then you get, money and cool little perks to craft
Would
some
be
stuff.
would be really awesome if they had a plan to release a couple like story DLC packs, and in among those another difficulty setting like a really master super hard mode that incentivizes you to go back, buy the DLC, replay the game again, with
Hmm.
an extra
Or
mode
New
that
Game
gives you a new
Plus. I'd be
achievement. Yeah,
totally down for a New Game
definitely.
Plus where
Hmm.
everything's a little bit harder. Maybe you keep some of your superpowers from the first run through, but then you can add more classes. That is the nice thing in, I think, Stick of Truth, there was the Mage, Thief, like Warrior, and Jew class, or Jewish class. And I think in Fractured But Whole so far, there's been like, there's a few you get to start, like you can choose at the beginning, and there's other options that open up. Like there's just way more diversity in gameplay for like your own personal powers, and so you could replay the game a few times over and have completely different move sets each time. And
Hmm.
they do like honestly kind of change the way you play. Like if you have moves that prioritize close combat or range combat, or you may play as more of a healer or more of like a kind of I don't know what's the term, like where you're kind of putting down effects and just kind of doing more of that thing and letting everyone else attack. Like it changes the way you play a little bit. And sure, the story and all that would be the exact same, and the over or the hub world sort of stuff would maintain the same thing. But if it's a New Game Plus and you enjoy the story a lot, like I would love a New Game Plus mode to come back to it,
Yeah.
and replay in a 6 months time or something. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
definitely.
I do think the DLC is gonna be pretty substantial. Looking at the season pass, like I
Yeah,
mean,
it does
obviously not
seem it
Dawn Guard, but
seems like it's got to be pretty beefy to like justify it. And
yeah, $30.
I don't think that Matt and Trey, they are like kind of the people that say like don't pre-order. You would think that they might end up being the people that want to make sure that it's quality DLC that you'd actually want to buy.
Hmm.
So I think I'll definitely be picking it up, because if there's new adventures, if there's any sort of new quests, I'm gonna have to pick it up.
Yeah,
But I do think that eventually it might go down a little bit in price, and then when I have a little extra cash again, pick that up. Once I've actually even beaten the main game to begin with. And another thing, like kind of the final thoughts, I think if you can't afford the game, or if you don't have like a system to play it on, a computer that can run it, or all you have is a Switch, which unfortunately it's not on, like Stick of Truth, and even this probably at this point. They have edits of like the full movies on YouTube, and
uh-huh.
it's not the same exact experience, as playing, of course. Like it's so much more fun to play. So if you can play, I definitely recommend that. But you get really, you get a very similar experience. You get the idea of what the story is, what everything that's going on. There's some edits that have all the fights and the dialogue that's important in those, and
Hmm.
so it's put together really well, with nobody commentating over it, just watching the movie. The cutscenes and gameplay just seems flawlessly like the show. So if you haven't watched them yet and you're a fan of the show, you have to go at least watch the videos, and the movies on YouTube, because I think that it's 2 hours plus of new South Park content, basically a new movie or a new like mini season of the show.
Yeah.
So I
Well, I
think
mean, if it's if it's 200 hours of or 200 minutes of content like in the YouTube version, that's a 10 episode season right there. Like to
Mhm.
watch, just binge a whole season.
Right.
Like each mission in the game, with the cutscene and then the dialogue and the combat is like a whole episode, like one campaign mission, and then the side missions obviously can all add up to certain stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's definitely gameplay is awesome. Where I think Stick of Truth could sometimes lack in gameplay and be a little repetitious and bland, and yeah, especially like it still has the problem here, but Stick of Truth I think was even at times really, really like too easy. Fractured Butthole like has awesome gameplay, awesome diversity of classes, and like gameplay attacks and power-ups and all that. And then the story, I think maybe I just like it even more too because I'm loving superhero movies and have been binging all the Marvel movies. I'm loving the kind of just superhero mentality, but it had you asking the question, and as we close out the show, just like what they could do for a third one to wrap up the trilogy. Like it seems like in my mind, and I just maybe need to get more familiar with South Park, like they've messed around with kind of the Lord of Rings, Game of Thrones fantasy stuff before to do something like Stick of Truth, and we've had Coon and Friends and Captain Chaos, or that's his name, right?
Professor Chaos.
Professor Chaos, yeah. Professor Chaos from like early on, like season 2 or 3. Like he's always been around. Like we've had a lot of that stuff to kind of build it up. The Fractured Butthole for a while. Is there another sort of recurring sort of theme that they've had in the show before? Like could they just do a Fractured Butthole, Infinity War where it's like a part 2?
I mean, they could do. They did. I mean, it hasn't been like too recurring, but like they did the anime thing. They could do like the Dragon Ball Z sort of like.
Oh yeah.
Really overpowered kind of, but the superhero thing is very similar to that. So yeah, that's a good point because I can't really think of another.
Because I was thinking,
long-running
like, pop
thing.
culture-wise, like, the next best thing would be, like, a Star Wars-y, like,
Right.
everyone's a Jedi or a Sith, like, Cartman's a Sith or something, and Butters is a Jedi or whatever, and, you can, like, they could just do, A New Hope or something, or just play up on Star Wars and just do
No,
it
they
as...
did stuff like Imagination Land, which kind of, like, was almost a mini movie and was released like on DVD separately. They could do something, because
I'm just wondering, like, pop culture wise too, because Stick of Truth came out at the perfect time with, like, Skyrim, like, even calling them like your character was the Dovahkiin and all of that, like.
And this one is perfect too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, what's the kind of pop culture thing to play off of? Like, I would feel like Star Wars, because by the time the third one would be coming out, it would be the Han Solo, like, solo movie.
Yeah.
It would have had Rogue One. It'd be Episode 9 probably by then. Like
they haven't
a
done
Boba
much
Fett movie.
Star Wars, stuff really.
Yeah.
That's interesting, and I can almost see them not forcing something if they don't have anything that really fits perfectly, unless they could just do something that's a little more of just a traditional, not dressing up like as anything, just going on kind of an adventure in itself.
Yeah,
almost
definitely.
like a movie that's actually more just kind of in lines with one of the adventures that they actually went on in like the South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut, where there was these different story arcs going on. It would almost be interesting, to not like do a Grand Theft Auto thing, but to have it where you almost like do a mechanic where you switch between characters like Grand Theft Auto. It'd be interesting to not be the new kid maybe for once, or like to play as Satan or play as just one of any of the characters, or God, as Lemmy Winks. They could put you kind of like Mario with Cappy, to where you.
I really think because right now we don't have too much like. We don't have too much in the day-to-day life like that they've really played into. So yeah, the third one could totally just be set up as like the conclusion to the trilogy. You've gone on this epic adventure as the new kid, going through like capturing the Stick of Truth and solving the Civil War, and then like the third one could just be, I mean, even if they stick with you being the new kid, like we haven't had too much of just you go to class and
that'd
you're
be
hanging
really
out
awesome
or whatever
too.
like just it's refreshing. There's a few moments where I think they're just not in their costumes or something, and it's just like, it's weird to see like all the characters like not dressed up as superheroes or something like. But yeah, I think they could definitely do something like that. Although I'd be hoping for Star Wars.
Yeah,
just because how cool that'd be if everyone had like lightsabers and they're all fighting and just playing up the force. Like you use your fart as the force.
Well, I really don't like. They did something like Imagination Land. I think that they had so many. Like I looked it up real quick, and they have pictures from the characters that appeared, and they really had like everybody in it. I think there was like Mario maybe made a brief appearance. They had all these fantasy characters, Santa Claus, and like they could just kind of go wild. Something that they could just, take it to
and
the
even
most
leave
extreme
South Park.
possible.
Like if they did Imagination Land, they could leave South Park behind. Which
Yeah.
that has been like one of my other like, kind of small complaints is like there's been a lot of locations where, especially since we watched Stick of Truth's whole gameplay before we started playing Fractured, like there's a lot of places that are just the same, obviously because you're just still in South Park, so it's you still are going to be going to the same places, same houses, and they've obviously added some things and fleshed some more areas out, and you're going to like the back room if you haven't gone to the back room before. But there have been a lot of areas where it's like, okay, this is almost ripped exactly from Stick of Truth, which is fine. It's not like a complaint in that regard where it lowers the score or whatever, but it's just kind of like it is what it is. So if they did one where you're in Imagination Land and you're just kind of going into that, it could be refreshing to have like a completely whole new open world to explore,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, there we go. Those are a couple of our ideas for what we would like to see out of the third South Park, if they make one, but we're loving Fractured Butthole. It's currently sitting at an 80 on Metacritic out of 59 reviews, so it's doing great on there, and you guys can pick it up on Steam, PlayStation, Xbox One. Hopefully it comes to Switch eventually, because it would definitely be able to run on Switch and could be really fun to play on there. So it could come one day. And yeah, next week we're going to be talking about Super Mario Odyssey. We'll finally have played it and have our initial impressions of the game. And so next week will be completely dedicated to that. But Assassin's Creed Origins is coming out this week. I personally am saving to play that until I think it's like Curse of the Pharaoh Gods or something comes out. And they're going to be adding like a photo mode and a mode where you can battle like against Egyptian gods. It sounds awesome. And so I'm going to wait on that until that comes out. And Wolfenstein 2 is also coming out this week, but maybe we'll save our discussion for that until we actually play it, and maybe save it for around the time where the Switch version is coming out, and we can talk about it when it's coming out on the Switch. But until next week, where we talk about Mario, go!